Safety is one of those things that no one individual benefits over the other as you build a culture. And so as leadership, when we see candidates coming into our organization, the first thing we do is obviously the tone is set by the leadership of the site, the capability they're joining, whether it's operations or engineering. And we want to make sure that they understand why that message is what it is.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartman, and on this show, we bring you ideas and insights from construction leaders across the country to help you lead more effectively. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. If you have a sales team and you have a business development team who is not with consistency and discipline forecasting the upcoming sales that they expect to have, you, my friend, are flying blind. Now, how do we solve that? Do I have to invest in a giant CRM that costs a ton of money, that takes forever to implement, and that your salespeople aren't going to use in the future? No, don't do that. We can solve it within 30 minutes with the Simple Sales Pipeline. Where can you find more information about the Simple Sales Pipeline? Yes, thesimplesalespipeline.com. In January, I was honored to moderate a panel with some outstanding leaders that was organized from three distinguished organizations. First was the National Academy of Construction, the second one was Texas A&M University, and the third one was the University of Texas at Austin. Now, this event was titled a symposium, which at first I had to do a little double check. Normally, I'm not invited to symposiums, so I actually had to look it up. I Googled it, and I learned that it's a conference or meeting to discuss a particular subject. Okay, that made sense. What we were talking about here was introducing and embedding safety culture concepts in undergraduate education. So how can we bring industry and construction firms together to really understand what they're looking for in terms of safety concepts? Maybe that's OSHA 10 or OSHA 30, but also larger safety mental models that you're going to hear us talk about, which includes physical safety, mental safety, emotional safety, and really expands this idea of safety and bridges the gap between industry and a university setting. An alternate definition of symposium was, quote unquote, a drinking party or convivial discussion, especially as held in ancient Greece after a banquet. This was not a drinking party, although now that I think of it, this could be a nice little add-on for the next symposium that's held by the National Academy of Construction. They have held multiple symposiums around the country. I think we were the third or fourth, and then there's one more that's happening in Boulder, Colorado in the next few weeks. Now, going into any event where I'm going to speak publicly, we do a lot of research, and I often have some nerves. I didn't have many nerves at all at this event because the four people that were on the panel I knew were all stellar. And in speaking to them, you realized instantly how smart they are. They have good sense of humor, and these are real practitioners. These are professionals in construction that have very definitive points of view, and they know what it takes to be successful. So there's four individuals here. The first one was Tricia Thibodeaux, which is the absolutely perfect name for someone who graduated from Louisiana State University. She is the executive director of global health, safety, and environmental at FLUOR Corporation, one of the largest construction firms on the planet. Seated next to her was J.D. Slaughter. He's a professional engineer. He's the chairman at S&B Engineers and Constructors based in Houston, Texas. J.D. is a Texas A&M graduate, as is Jeremy Stovall, who's the president at Brookstone Construction. And he was seated next to Mr. Todd Svihovec, the director of project services at Flint Hills Resources. And where did he go to school? Was it Texas A&M? Nope. Is it University of Texas at Austin? Nope. Is it LSU like Tricia? No. He graduated from the University of North Dakota. Mascot? The Fighting Hawk. That's right, the Fighting Hawk. Because if we just had a hawk that wasn't interested in fighting, well, how tough would you be? Anyway, I was thrilled to moderate this panel. And quite frankly, I told them with this much talent in a panel, you could either just roll the microphone out and let them handle it themselves, or you could get a monkey to do it and they would probably speak less. Either way, I was thrilled to be part of this, and you are going to learn a lot from these 4 leaders. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation moderating this panel that was held by Texas A&M University, the National Academy of Construction, and the University of Texas at Austin, featuring Tricia Thibodeaux, J.D. Slaughter, Todd Svihovec, and Jeremy Stovall. I know, the longest introduction ever to a podcast. As always, thank you for listening. We're going to start off here just a little bit. Tricia, I'm going to start with you and we'll go down. I want to know hometown. I want to know alma mater. Okay. And I want to know where your passion for safety came from. And then that'll kind of lead us into the questioning. So Tricia Thibodeaux, FLUOR Construction.
Right.
Yep.
So my name is Tricia Thibodeaux. Hometown, original hometown is Lafayette, Louisiana, and my alma mater is LSU. I'm surprised they let me in the building here, but my passion for safety, I'd say, really started as a summer intern.
I need a mic.
You need a mic? All right, so my passion for safety really started, I'd say, when I was a summer intern. I actually came over and worked at Lyondell-Citgo Refinery just on the other side of town. And they had my office right in the middle of the refinery, which was very interesting. They don't do that now, of course. But I got to know all of the operators there, and one of them in particular I really was fond of. He ended up getting hurt while I was there on the job, and he ended up hurting his back. So he came back into the job site, and they put him working with me, a summer intern. He's an operator. So it was interesting. And I was thinking, why are you here? You should be home resting. Why are you here? So that was my first introduction. Many years later, I understood why he was there and still working. But I think understanding and getting to know really the operators doing the operations and maintenance there on the job and understanding the work that they do and getting to know them as people really helped to encourage my passion for safety. And then, of course, as I started working at FLUOR and Engineering and Construction, working with the construction workers who are actually installing our designs really helped as well. So that's my story.
Great. J.D. Slaughter, I'm chairman of S&B Engineers and Constructors here in Houston. I'm native Houstonian, which is rarer and rarer these days in the city. Texas A&M graduate, chemical engineering, 1996. Stop pulling the face back there. My passion for safety, I'm third generation owner of S&B. My grandfather co-founded it in 1967. My father was really integral in the safety culture of the company from the beginning. As chairman of the company, safety starts and stops. If anyone gets injured enough to where they go to the hospital, my business partner, Brooke Brookshire, and I have agreed one of us will be there as fast as we can get there. And so, as you know, sitting in a hospital room with an injured employee and their spouse and children is not the easiest thing in the world. But we've committed we'll always do that because I want to not forget ultimately who pays the price for injuries. It's not me. It's not an engineer in the office. It's the people doing the work. It's our coworkers. So that's where my passion really is. S&B has had one fatality in our history. Jose Cortez, 1993, in his 20s, married, young kids. In April, it'll be 30 years since his fatality. I often think about those kids. They're in their 30s now and how their life has been affected by it. So that's where really my passion sits.
Good morning, Todd Svihovec. I'm with Flint Hills Resources. I'm the director of process technology and design. And I guess my hometown is Dickinson, North Dakota. So do we have any other people from North Dakota in the audience? Probably not. So a long time ago, obviously, went to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. At one point when I graduated, it was the Fighting Sioux. We can't say that anymore. And I did remember Bradley, what the mascot is. It's the Fighting Hawk now. So you can tell I'm not as close to my alma mater as I should be probably. But my first experience kind of with safety on a personal level was a graduate research assistant, master's degree in chemical engineering. And the university up there is part of a large coal lignite power plant in North Dakota. Where I grew up was on the Bakken Shale, so heavy petroleum, heavy drilling and activities when I was going through high school. I saw personally as I went to college and saw my friends not go to college and move to the oil patch, get hurt, and never forget a guy that was pretty close to was driving down the road one day and his arm was out the window and this big white, looked like a pillow around his arm, and I pulled up to him and I said, "Hey, what happened?" He goes, "Well, I was working the other day and I had my hand in the wrong place and I almost lost my arm." And so it was really kind of a personal connection there. But back to the research, really where I felt the accountability and personal accountability for my own personal safety is there wasn't many people around me in the research center. So I had the fortunate to actually build an experiment and work with some high temperature and some pressure, some flammable liquids or flammable gases, and I was by myself. And I knew this would be a bad day if I didn't understand what was appropriate from a safety mitigation standpoint. So fortunately, the ERC helped me understand that, helped put some procedures in place, and I was able to get appreciation. And then the learnings obviously start when you enter into the industry directly. So that's really my story.
All right, well, good morning. My name is Jeremy Stovall. I'm the president and partner at Brookstone Construction. So I'm the representative, I guess, for vertical building construction here this morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. I grew up in a very small town in northeast Texas called Alba. It's about 30 miles north of Tyler, a very small farming and ranching community on Lake Fork, if there are any bass fishermen in the room or fisherwomen. So I went to Texas A&M, have a degree in construction science, so put the plug in there, beneficiary, Stan, of the CIAC, have great appreciation for what goes on campus, but also great appreciation for our other institutions here locally and throughout the country. So it's been a privilege to serve as an industry representative in a variety of higher education formats. So passion for safety. I think for me, I grew up, again, as I said, in a very small town. I'm a first-generation college student. I only knew one family member who went to college. He went to the University of Texas. He was an architect. That was my passion until, let's just say, I saw the light. So I had the opportunity to go to college and get a degree and come to work at Brookstone. And on my first project, it was a church project just north of University of Houston. It was my first time to ever be around the craft worker. I grew up, I would like to say I have a good, solid view on life and understanding and appreciation for people. But when you watch the men and women who put these projects in place, you quickly understand the opportunities you've been given to take a certain path and the opportunities they've been given. And without the craft worker, we can't get this work done in any of our industries we're talking about. And so from day one as an intern on that church near University of Houston, I became passionate about the person that's on the other end of the work. And then I took a short time away from Brookstone to work as an owner's representative. I was representing an owner on a single-family residential development where one of the on-site contractors had a fatality on a large utility excavation. And I will tell you, JD, I still remember standing in the emergency room with that family and never, ever to this day want to be in that position again. So passion started about people and then very unfortunately had a very close encounter with that. And so what we are talking about here today is the most important thing we can talk about. So I appreciate being in the room with women and men who see life the same way and want to make a difference in our industry. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Sometimes when you moderate a panel, you talk to folks ahead of time, you do some prep work, understand who they are, kind of some of their perspectives. Sometimes there's a concern that they're going to be flat. Are they going to say things that really challenge people and change things? I have zero concerns with this panel as a whole. JD in particular, and I told him after talking to him, I'm like, let's just stop here. You're good. I'm going to get you going first. So JD, I'm going to ask you this question first. As you think about the safety culture at S&B, what drives your company's need to have new employees embrace that culture? And are there things that you guys do specifically to start seeing these behaviors sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the 80s, we had terrible safety as a company. We actually lost a job because of safety. My father thought it's a business imperative that we improve safety. All these idiots are getting hurt. I got to figure out how to stop this. So we had a recordable injury rate, like almost 10. Okay. So he went through every injury to determine how many were unpreventable. Because I'm trying to set a goal. Nobody has a common goal that I can, for safety. It's a 1, a 2, cut your rate in half every year. What's going to be my goal? He was a fan of Deming, continuous improvement. And so he was going to use that methodology. He went through the entire stack of a bunch of injuries. And guess how many were unpreventable? 0. So at that point, 1, he says, I realize they're not idiots, I am. 2, 0 is the only goal I can choose. It's our moral obligation at that point to pursue 0. A couple of the things he realized is we were performing projects horribly. Engineering was not done well, not to suit construction. Our supply chain procurement was garbage, unpredictable. The job sites were a goat rope. Okay, they were just chaos. We didn't have great systems. So he dove into Deming and said, I'm going to do continuous improvement, plan, do, check, act, manage inputs, not outputs. And he transformed with a team of people our project execution capability. When I come to a safety symposium, the last thing I want to talk about is OSHA safety. Everybody is sort of getting into control. How can we get the last bit? And I think you have to go way back. Manage inputs, not outputs. Emmett Nelson said in his article here that we need to embrace CII safety concepts and that a safe job site will become more productive. I think he's got it wrong. A safe job site is productive because the inputs that go into the project are predictable and managed with certainty. Engineering, procurement, planning, equipment, tools, all those things are done with methodically. So as chairman, I review every lump sum bid that goes through our office. The threshold for me is, can that job be done managed with certainty? Can I have a predictable outcome? Can this project go well? If the answer is no, I don't bid it. I can guarantee you I'll have a safe project. I'll have nobody injured if I don't bid the work. I don't do the job. Safety culture starts with sacrificing your pocketbook in order to do the right thing. And if I see a bid package that's garbage, ill-defined, they don't know how to spell PDRI, then we pass it up. And our organization understands that. I rarely even get them anymore. Because if I'm going to put someone in harm's way, I've got to be able to guarantee that they're going to be able to work safely. And that goes through engineering all the way through. So someone comes to work for us as a process engineer, going to do hydraulics. Is getting the hydraulics right important to someone who's going to install the line one day? Well, you say, well, it doesn't matter the size of the line they should install it. But what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if the plant starts up and doesn't quite meet spec? Does that cause a problem in the organization that designed me to build the plant? They're not making money. There's a commercial pressure. There's time pressure to get it done. Now, the crew I put out there to replace the line, are they going to be able to just take their time? No, exposure rate goes way up. Another thing Dad realized was a lot of our injuries occurred during out-of-sequence work, unplanned work, and rework. You eliminate those, your exposure hours come down, your safety gets better. So throughout the entire company you work for us, if you understand that when we commit to do something, we're going to do it with excellence. Because the people who are the most at risk, the people in the field, deserve it.
Thanks. Tricia, if you can kind of take that same question as you think about bringing on new talent and how can you speed the adoption? Obviously, FLUOR operating at a somewhat different scale. How do you think about that? Are there specific things you have in place that you've learned over the years that work better to increase the engagement and really embrace these behaviors?
Right. So we do, as we bring new personnel on, we're orientation programs for everybody. So as people are coming into our offices, say if they're engineers, designers, they're going to get a certain level of training from day one, and it's very specific. Safety is embedded in all of the training that they're doing. For the office folks, it's really in the engineers and designers, it's important that we convey to them how what they do on paper in their designs goes to the construction. So we want them to think about not only the community, of course, also the operators that are going to be operating that facility, but also for us, being an engineering construction company, those construction workers that are going to be installing their designs. How can we think about them in our designs that we're doing in the home office so that we can make those guys at the sharp end of the stick who are the most at risk be able to install things safely, as safe as possible. They have the most impact. Engineering design has the most impact on how our workers at site can stay safe. For the construction workers coming in, we have a new employee development program at all of our sites. We make sure that they have the safety training that they need, but we also pair them with a mentor. So they have someone coming in, not only their supervisor, of course they have their supervisor, but they also have a peer mentor who's been in the industry for a little while and can help them make sure that they're looking out for each other, make sure that they feel comfortable saying, time out, let's stop the work for a second. It doesn't look right. It's not what we expected. And really, that really helps with the interdependent safety culture that we're going after on all of our job sites. It's hard to get, and it takes constant work. But if we can bring people in that way, it seems to really be helpful.
You can send that down. Jeremy, I saw you making notes there. I think between
I'm here to learn.
Between JD and Tricia, kind of covered a lot of territory. I'm curious, you and then followed by Todd, what comes to mind, different, similar, or what sort of insights or things jump out when you hear JD and Tricia talk about that?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Tricia. I like the safety mentor. I was writing that down. I think that's a very cool idea. We have mentors, we pair them together, but it's mostly about career development. So take that to the safety and go. So at Brookstone, you're hearing from probably the smallest company represented here in your panel. So in the early 2000s, my predecessor and mentor, the late Steve Dishman, decided that at our company, we had learned a tremendous amount by serving the industrial sector. So we're a commercial building construction company, building churches and schools and fire stations and all of those things. But we had this little niche working in the petrochemical plants, building vertical construction. And because of that, we had been forced to learn how to work safely and not just say we work safely. So he set out to hire the best he could from a leadership standpoint of safety. We brought in a safety director who's still with us today. He's built the entire program. That person reported directly to him. Still to this day, he reports directly to me. Our effort was to take what we learned in what I'll say your environment, okay, that has years and lots of people and data behind it, and apply it to every sector we're in. So today, one of I think our strengths, and again, it comes down to being able to pursue business. JD, you said you lost work because of safety. You know, when we can get in front of a client, let's say a church building committee, and talk about the way we approach safety on a project, they look and they say, well, that's something different. I didn't hear that from the last three folks coming in here. And again, these are people who recognize the value of the worker and the craft worker on the site. So we're able to apply that. So I'd say that's the first thing, is our lessons learned. Secondly, for Brookstone, it's about the wiring of the person. Since 1992, we've utilized some onboarding services and some continued mentoring and coaching services from industrial psychologists and assessments and all sorts of tools. And those are whole person conversations. These are not specific to safety. So again, we're not, do you have your OSHA 30? Do you know, when you need a ladder for a trench? You know, those are not the questions. It's the wiring questions about who is this person and how do they see life. And what I would say, we're looking for people that value people. Respect, civility, responsibility, ethics. when you have a person who recognizes that the human that they're working with ought to be valued and protected, then you can apply the OSHA conversations, you can apply the rules and the regulations. And so when I think about the context of higher education and what we're looking for when we go recruit, it's those students that have been given leadership and ethics. I think about the Texas A&M program right now, our cultural discourse program that we've put into place. The conversations that are being had in that room cause a student to think. I have a son that's at the university now and took that discourse class, and he came out, Stan, he listened to your lecture, and he came out, he's like, well, first of all, who is this guy? But thinking about the bigger things in life. And so I think as we challenge students, both technically, process, project management, all of those things, yes, let's have our safety class. Yes, let's mention safety, but continue to focus on those intangibles, because then you produce a person that we can take as industry and mold and shape into a professional or a craft worker that values one another. So I think those are the two things, our pursuit of excellence across all markets, lessons learned in the industrial and petrochemical, and then secondly, how we hire and who we're looking for, bringing them on boards.
Great. I just want to say, Jeremy, that last part you were talking about there really hit home for me on just how the human side of the picture you need to paint and what you're looking for out of candidates or graduates that come out of the colleges on how they relate to people. That's so important, because that's where it starts, right? You know, one of the things I want to say is, for my colleagues up here, I know, Brookstone I don't know as well, but I know S&B and FLUOR very well, and I understand how their culture's built at the top. And I understand that it's a very strong culture, Brookstone I'm sure as well. And so as JD said, it starts with leadership. And as an owner's organization, we don't we don't perform construction ourselves. So we do maintenance, we do small things in the operating units. We do get people hurt. I mean, it's an operating unit, and it's unfortunate, right? But the one thing I want to convey is it starts at the top in the way that our culture starts with leadership. And one thing I'm blessed and happy to be part of is a culture that really is holistic in what we like to describe as virtuous cycles of mutual benefit. So safety is one of those things that no one individual benefits over the other as you build a culture. And so as leadership, when we see candidates coming into our organization, the first thing we do is obviously the tone is set by the leadership of the site, the capability they're joining, whether it's operations or engineering. And we want to make sure that they understand why that message is what it is. So it starts with the vision. We look for people with the right virtues and talents that have a caring nature, a motivation, understand the ability to learn. We want to make sure they're bringing the level of knowledge necessary to engage in where they're being applied, where they're being assigned, whether it's operations or engineering. And then we look for comparative advantage. One of the things I think in safety sometimes that we look back at the root cause failure analysis and we go, did that person really have the right knowledge to understand what was happening? And we know that when they come out of school, they're not going to have all the knowledge. And that's a commitment, starting at the top we make, that we have to make sure that we're owning the environment they're in, that we understand their comparative advantage and where they're needing more knowledge. And then we can feel better about putting them in a situation where they will be able to handle the issues. And lastly, we want them to be motivated. We want to be motivated around safety. Just as we're all describing, I like to think about safety in a way that, it says, well, how safe were you getting to work today? We could all do a little exercise, stand up and say, did you speed? Did you have your seatbelt on before you put it in reverse or drive? We could do all that. But the answer we're all going to give is, I was safe enough to get here until I wasn't, right? And so we always have to think about what is our perspective minute by minute in terms of where are we putting ourselves, whether it's at work or at home. Are we putting ourselves in a situation that's going to make us unsafe? And I think every person, and this is where the university side of it gets interesting, is as educators, and I talked a little bit about my research experience coming through college, but as educators, where is the tone set? And so we're interviewing candidates as we listen to their motivations, as we listen to where their interest lies, and we're listening for, are they capable of hearing a message and acting on a message? And so I just maybe open-ended question back to the academics is, where in the curriculum do candidates or graduates get the tone on safety?
All right, I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction here. Just curious. I'm looking for a one number answer. Just one number, okay? Scale of 0 to 100. 0 is absolutely none. Don't even think about it. 100 is the only factor that I think about. When you are thinking about the ideal candidate coming out of school that you are going to hire, where does safety, you can define that however you want. And again, we're only looking for one number. If one of you goes on a 5-minute monologue, I'm going to cut you off. I'm looking for a number, okay? So where does safety factor in to a new graduate coming out? We'll go right down the line. You guys don't need the microphone. Tricia? I lied. You totally need the microphone. You're going to need to use that.
I do need the microphone.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think, can
I'm
I
just looking
say
for
anything or a
Tricia.
number?
Yeah, I mean,
With no explanation.
you're violating the rule right now. I'm just looking for a number. However you want to define it, and then we will talk about this.
I'd say 50.
50, all right?
20.
20?
I was going to say 50.
50?
25.
All right. 50? A lot happened just there. I forgot. 50, 20, 50, 25. Jeremy, keep that microphone. Take this kind of question. We're thinking about the numbers that were just given by your colleague panelists there. When you think about what you want in a new graduate hire, how does safety factor into your thinking?
Yeah, so in prep for today, I was sitting with Chris Roberts, our director of safety, and we were kind of going through these concepts and this notion of hiring, and both of us stared at each other across the table, and we said, I don't really know. I don't know that we are as focused at the hiring table. Now, I said what I said about hiring the right kind of person, because we know that you get the person that values the people and the human experience, then you can train them, but should we back that up? And should we be looking across the table at the candidate and really evaluating their ability to work safely, lead safely, evaluate? So I think the answer is, for our company, we've got some improvement on that front. We could do a better job at the hiring table, at the recruiting, at the career fair at U of H or A&M or LSU or wherever we are, and standing there and saying, talk to me about how you see life, about humans and interaction and lead towards safety. So I think that probably from today's conversation and our prep, we're going to revisit this topic a little bit. So he and I actually kind of talked, we didn't assign numbers, but I would like to think that our hiring managers really at some point, a quarter of their brain is thinking about this. You clearly, I guess if you had a candidate sitting across the table with you that was, I don't know, tripped on their shoelaces walking in, or, whatever, some egregious situation, you're going to factor that. But are we diving deeper? And then the question I have is, how do we dive deeper? I'd be interested in, larger organizations that maybe do, if 50 is there, then what is FLUOR doing that does drill deeper in, is this candidate quality from the safety standpoint? So there, I got my 5-minute monologue.
No, you're good. Todd, why don't you take that mic and run with that?
Yeah, I would, I said 50, and not just because Tricia said it, but because we want to really think about the values and beliefs that people bring to the job, and it's that human side of it. And so we really look at our recruiting process and our selection process based on that. And we're always, values and beliefs over skills and knowledge. And the reason we say that, because we think we can always give people the right knowledge and the skills to be successful, but we really can't change their values or their beliefs. And so we drill into that through that process. And that's why I say, I think, book knowledge will come based on the role that they're applying for, but really understanding the individual as the person and their experience in the value system they use to make decisions and judgment around really gives us a window into whether they're connecting to key concepts that are trainable, that they can learn, all that stuff. So that's really where we focus our time.
Hey, JD? Sorry, before you get, if you could kind of weave in there, I thought when we were talking, you really brought up something interesting that I've been thinking a lot more about, which is just accountability and professionalism that starts much sooner when I meet you and I get a job offer.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that ties in, but if you could.
What the hell does a 20-year-old know about anything? They know everything, but they don't know anything. So the idea that I'm going to look at a candidate who's been graduating in mechanical engineering, and I'm like, what's your safety culture like? I mean, the guy wears flip-flops to class, whatever. So I don't, you interview someone and they're coming out of college. Again, safety performance is an output. You manage the inputs. I'm going to take that person and hire them and put them in our company, and they're going to be soaked in the buttermilk of our culture. What I'd like to see a little bit more, in my role in the Chemical Engineering Advisory Council and now the College of Engineering, and I talk to a lot of freshmen, I tell them your career doesn't start 4 years from now, or 5, like me. Your career starts today. Approach college like you're approaching your career with a little bit more professionalism. What I'd like to see out of college is professors, if you have a process or procedure that you want your students to follow on anything, how to communicate to you, how to turn in work, not just a lab wearing safety goggles, but anything, and they violate it, and it's probably more work on you, but don't allow them to get away with it. Don't be so lenient. If they make an 80 on a physical chemistry test, I never even got that close, or a thermodynamics test, is 20% failure okay? I got a project right now in East of here, $1.5 billion project, 2,000 people on site, 50,000 engineered documents and specifications. Can 1,000 of them be wrong, right? How about you turn it back in and say, yeah, you got an 80, but before I'll give you 5 more points if you finish the 20 you got wrong and turn it back in. Because in our industry, we can't take 20% failure, right? A little bit more professionalism in the university environment, to me, would pay dividends. Communication, don't let them text you, right, or emojis. Have them communicate on a professional level immediately. At A&M, unfortunately, in the College of Engineering, ethics is no longer required a class to graduate. They're going to weave it into the curriculum in other classes. Are they really? Ethics is one of the most important classes that I took, I think. College teaches you the how, what, and sometimes the why, but the should seems to be thrown out. Should you go to class in a t-shirt and flip-flops, or should you dress up a little more professional? To me, it impacts me when I interview someone who's wearing a suit and tie like they've actually done it before. Could carry themselves that way. You see what I'm saying? So I don't expect them to be safety professionals coming out of college, but they have to get into an environment where they respect process and procedure. If they can do it better, great. Explain it, but still follow procedure. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I think people downplay this crop of kids as being whatever. I think I've never met I'll tell Fernando this, I've never met a group of people less interested in money and more interested in making an impact on the world. Let's embrace that, because a chemical engineer doing a hydraulic calculation, can save someone from getting injured in the field. It's true. Is that kind of what you wanted to do?
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, Tricia?
All right. So I'd say at FLUOR, when we're hiring someone in, we really are talking to them first about what our core values are, and safety is the first one. So we're starting indoctrinating them when it comes to the interview. We're talking to them about safety. No, they're not going to be safety experts. We don't expect them to be. We'll be able to train them on that. But you can get an idea of what an individual's risk tolerance is just by talking to them about how they work. And what their expectations are, and what their values are, and that can really play into safety. So there's a lot of aspects of safety that are totally outside of the regulations that really help us to get the safety culture that we want, and it really does start with that interview process.
Okay. Why don't you stay right there? Let me ask you about, and you kind of referred to earlier when we think about codes and we think about standards, and I think we'd all agree to some degree that is really important. However, that is far from being the primary objective. When you're thinking about the students that you're looking to hire at FLUOR, maybe tell me a little bit about how you think about and how your leadership team thinks about the difference between the technical training versus the more generalized leadership training and what you're looking for. And if you have any suggestions or ideas or successes where that happened earlier and some students were coming in with some of that or more developed, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I'd say that, the basic kind of training, the OSHA 10, OSHA 30 is great. We'd love to see that when kids come in, for them to have that type of certification. We like it more if they have additional internships. I think A&M said they require internships, which is great. We're definitely looking for that as kids come in, because that real world experience makes all the difference. So as we're going through as they're going through their curriculum, the more kind of real world hands-on experiences they can get, even in their classrooms, really help as we're bringing them in. I know a lot of engineering degrees finish with some kind of capstone project at the end. If they can not only do the design piece of that, but also actually physically build whatever it is that they're designing, and so that it has to work in order for them to pass that capstone design, that's very helpful, because that plays into a lot of different aspects, including not only the technical side of things, but also the teamwork, working together. As engineers, of course, we don't do anything by ourselves, so that's very important. And then also the safety aspects come into play as well as they're building on their capstone design project. So that's very helpful to us too. We're looking for all of these little things that can help as we're bringing in a new grad.
Wonderful. Do you mind passing the mic down to Todd? Todd, let me just ask you that same sort of question here. What differences do you see between the technical safety training and safety leadership training? How do you think about it? Is one more important?
Yeah. No, I actually don't think one's more important. I think they're both important. And the opportunity I see that, when you're thinking about both of them, is really one of influence. I think the comment on collaboration and what we have to learn or train ourselves on, even as experienced industry professionals, on what does collaboration really do to bring technology and performance together, or whether it's safety or whether it's anything else. And I think the thing that I think back to my ops design class, and it was always the person, and I think we can all experience this or have experienced this, where someone's just a natural leader. They're a huge influence on how things get set up, get framed, get done, get understood. That's a real characteristic and attribute in people today that will be successful in safety or around organizations that are caring about safety. Because as we say to every candidate that comes into our organization, everybody is a leader. And you don't need the title, you don't need the number of direct reports. You're a leader in safety, your influence matters, and you always have the decision rights to go impact if it's unsafe. Keep it from hurting somebody or change the way we do something to prevent it from happening in the future. And I think that collaboration, influence, leadership is something that could really help.
Jeremy, if you want to take the mic, as we were talking about this of kind of the technical safety training versus leadership training, really quickly our conversation moved to safety in a broader view, which was physical safety, sure, psychological safety, emotional safety. Maybe can you just expound on some of those thoughts and kind of how that ties into kind of a broader theme of leadership training?
I suspect we can all agree, but coming out of these couple of years of just awkwardness that our world has had, supply chain, pricing pressures, economic, pandemic, whatever we want to add in there, I'm looking at team members who are more than ever before bringing life to work with them. And it's impacting our workforce. It's impacting the craft worker. They wake up with marriage problems and kids that are sick and all the things that you and I have. And when they show up on our site, if they're a craft worker, are they thinking clearly? If they're a professional manager, are they able to see the work that's happening clearly? Not to mention the work we're actually doing, but today's context, safety. So how are we supporting our workforce? We're right now today, this afternoon, a conversation's happening at my office about employee assistance programs and additional things we can layer in, because we're looking at professionals. And again, I'm a general contractor, so I have a small handful of craft workers, but I'm working with stands people and subcontractors all over the city. These folks are showing up with what's happened at home, on the freeway, in their pocketbook, and all of those things. And so how do we support them? I mean, we're looking at chaplaincy programs. We're looking at counseling services being made available, because I sat with one of our solid project managers about a year ago, and his conversation with me was nothing about Brookstone's a bad place or this industry's a bad place. This is tough. And I have a hard time getting up every day, coming and pushing this work in the world we live in. I'm tired of dragging people along, And I was like, well, welcome to our industry, right? Welcome to all of our industry. And so I think we as industry, and so now today, higher education, find ways to integrate that into our curriculum. If we want to call it mental health, if we want to call it assistance and support and programs, I don't know what all the buzzwords are. That's for the academics in the room. What I know from the industry is we have humans that come to work for us to put these projects in place. And I think, Stan, we have a responsibility to provide a place that can make them better people, not just give them a paycheck, but make them better people and give them a place to go when they do hit that rough spot that we all hit. None of us are immune to it. So.
Yeah. JD, I'm going to have you take the mic, and basically a question for, I think, all of you that can kind of summarize this. So we'll kind of move the mic down. JD, have a little variability here. You can choose whichever direction you want to go after this. Okay. Here's the question is, we are meeting here collectively 3 years from here. So it's January 2026. Okay. What would have to be true between the university settings, leadership there versus industry? What would have to be true for us collectively in our progress for you to look back and say, I'm happy 3 years ago we're here today, and we've made progress on these things, and I'm happy with it. What would have to be true?
Well, I failed to make a point on the question of what I'm looking for in a student, the 20%. We had one time a mechanical engineering department head interviewing a potential mechanical engineering new grad, went out to the lobby to get him, and his parents were with him. And he introduced them to the parents, and they shook hands. That was very nice. And he said, okay, well, let's come back to the interview. And the parents got up to come into the interview. Okay.
Is there a problem there?
That's a problem.
Okay, all right. Just to be clear.
So I think fundamentally when someone's graduating, 4.0, it doesn't matter. If they've never worked a day in their life, never been responsible to anybody to earn a paycheck, that's, to me, a problem. We have the Brookshire Foundation Scholarship at S&B for employees, but also they do it at University of Houston and LSU. If you're carrying 30 hours, 15 and 15 part-time work hours and 15 hours in college, or 10 and 20 or 10, 20 or 10, then you're eligible for the scholarship. So he's incentivizing people to work while they go to school. He studied it and showed statistically people do better when they have a part-time job while they're going through college. Why? Less time to goof off, more focus. So I will say, A&M has a thing called the Aggie X Factor in College of Engineering, where if you work part-time, you intern, you're in part of one of the many student organizations and get into a leadership position. Anywhere where you take responsibility outside of your core curriculum to do work, then you achieve that milestone. And I tell you, when we are interviewing people and they don't have any work experience in their life, they can be brilliant, but are they going to get up in the morning and show up, right? Do they know what it's like to be responsible to another person? So I know it's not the university's responsibility to make sure these kids work, but I tell kids going to college all the time, get a part-time job. And of course the parents start like, oh my gosh, no. They need to focus on studies. I'll take a 3.5 that's been working their way through college faster than I'll take a 4.0 any day who's never worked a day in their life. So for me, if we start advocating for more of those extracurricular outside activities to help, especially engineers who are naturally introverted, I don't know if you know that, but an extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when they're talking to you, not your own, right? So the more that we get that, then they're going to be able to get into the ecosystem of our company and be able to survive better. You don't take a goldfish from the store and throw it right in the tank, right? It's got to float a little while and acclimate. And I think the college has the ability to really acclimate these kids to professionalism and even work environment. So 3 years from now, if I saw a lot more kids coming out with some work experience, I don't care if it's a bookstore, then that'd be a success.
Okay. Bar? Can they work at a bar?
What?
I worked at a bar in college. Does that count?
Oh, absolutely. You're a foreman immediately. You can handle a lot of stuff, buddy.
Head of the game. All right. Tricia, 3 years in the future, what would have to be true for the folks here in the room? Also, little plug here, but as a follow-up, to increase the overall dialogue that we are having here, I host a podcast called the Construction Leadership Podcast, so we are recording this. You guys have full editing rights, so we'll make sure, right? But the whole idea is that we can share this more broadly, leverage technology to have more students listen to this and encourage this conversation. So 3 years in the future, Tricia, us in this room, and anyone else involved in this conversation, what would have to be true for you to be happy with our progress?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the getting them to work during college, whether it's part-time or doing a summer internship or co-op, whatever. Having that experience is very important. And so anything that we can do to encourage them to do that would be great. I think that having safety core concepts embedded into the curriculum doesn't have to be a safety course necessarily, but having those concepts embedded into the curriculum, whether it's engineering, construction management, construction science, any of those, that's really important. I know that many universities are doing that already, but not all of them and not in every single discipline. So I think if we can have that in the next 3 years, something that we can measure for sure and see that it's coming out with those kids, that would be a success.
Watching time, quick question for kind of all of you, but Tricia specifically. Is it possible that there are certain things that FLUOR is doing today in terms of training that could either be shared or transferred or tweaked or customized that could then be exactly what you're talking about, of trying to embed some of these concepts that you're doing after they're hired, before they're hired? Is that possible?
I think it's possible for sure. So like I said, when we bring people in, there's definitely a safety curriculum that they're assigned to, depending on what their position is, but there's some core concepts that can apply to anybody across the board. That would be, I think that we could share easily, and other companies would be willing to share, I'm sure.
Okay, great. Todd, same question. 3 years in the future, what would have to be true to be happy with our progress?
Yeah, I like what Tricia said. I think there are some things that would be beneficial to have an introduction to in industry, or for industry coming out of academic curriculums, and things like some of the basics like lockout, tagout. I don't know if our industry or our curriculums anywhere teach why that's important. We teach possibly how to do it, but why to do it is and then fundamentals of all the process conditions that we deal with. But I think the other thing I would just reinforce back to in the curriculums, if leaders of academia are setting the tone about why safety is important for our industry, it's a business outcome, right? There's a virtuous cycle of mutual benefit again here, that as people understand what's important about being safe, it has a financial benefit to the industry, it has a financial benefit to the individual, and we oftentimes want to minimize personal results as a function of safety, right? It's a value. It's not something we're going to take a compromise on. But there are real world situations and real world outcomes as a way the organizations do perform and carry their culture around safety. So I don't know where that's taught or if it's taught in academia in any of the curriculums, but I think that would be helpful for our academic leaders to push on those issues a little more.
Jeremy, right before we'll allow you to bring us home, I think a lot of us, probably collectively, either directly or indirectly, all experienced something about safety very specific recently. Monday Night Football, Bills Bengals a couple weeks ago. We had a routine tackle from a healthy 24-year-old. A routine tackle also probably has the kinetic force of a car crash. Stood up, fell down, heart stopped. I think sometimes these things happen in pop culture, and how can we take these and the emotional well-being, do we do we continue the game? I guarantee you 10 years ago, 30, certainly 20 years ago, we cart them off and we keep playing. Now this whole discussion about the emotional well-being and the psychological well-being and when do we start and what happens, that is completely different. However, if we don't think that our students and us, we are part of the larger culture, this is entertainment. And what does it say about us? And I think that is something that this is happening all around us. Why are we bringing it in? I'm sure some professors are. But how can we capitalize on that when it's got everybody's attention about something that they really like, that they view distinct and different? And in the NFL and on construction sites, we both put things on our head to protect ourselves. So there's this recognition of risk. So I don't want to ramble there, but Jeremy, please take us home. Progress 3 years in the future.
No, good point. I'd say, Bradley, there were lots of elements of that picture during that telecast that ought to be used as snippets to teaching our future, right? About civility, respect, decision-making, all of that. So point taken. I would say I want to make sure that we are being recorded. I need the clip from J.D. Slaughter telling students to work. I love it, and I need it in my own house. So as we speak right now, my 20-year-old college student is working at Chick-fil-A at home on Christmas, and he happens to work for Phil Lewis's office at A&M. I will say, and I'll echo that, it definitely makes a difference in the students. So 3 years from now, safety in all the curricula. I think we can agree with that. And then I would say, and I'm not saying do it like Texas A&M, because there are things about this course that I think could be treated differently, but implement a class that has these conversations. I don't want to sound like a one message voice this morning, but this discourse class we have at A&M in the construction science program, I think it's university mandated. What I'll say, and I won't go way around the barn on this conversation because I have a lot of thoughts. Our program has taken that class and said the university mandates it. Let's talk to students about real issues that matter and will help them when they go forward. So I think all the universities ought to ask themselves, what hard questions should we be asking? What exposure to concepts should we be placing students in front of, so that then we can add on project management, scheduling, controls, all of those safety, geosciences, all those things added to make the whole student better.
No, you cannot. Thank you. Yes, you can.
We as an industry, do we have our own house in order? We're telling these young kids or young men and women, we don't have our house in order. Look at IPA. 45% of projects fail cost and schedule. 65% through mega projects. And I think in the United States is probably close to 100% of projects fail cost and schedule. When you have a project that's failing cost and failing schedule, is it a nice, fluffy butterflies and unicorns environment on the site? No, pressure's up. People's financials, the plant's not running, they're not making supply, it's chaos. And so, we're worse than the post office in terms of performance. So I'm hoping this next crop of young people come into our industry, CII, best practices, 40 years of development. What's our implementation percentage? 15%, 14%? We know what to do, we're not doing it. So I think we're hypocrites trying to tell these young people what to do. They need to grow. I love their desire to do the right thing, because I hopefully get in the position, become senior vice presidents and do the right thing and start using CII best practices fully, start doing projects well, start rejecting bad projects, because to me, we really don't have a leg to stand on to advocate anything if we don't have our house in order first.
All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Miss Tricia Thibodeaux, J.D. Slaughter, Todd Svihovec, and Jeremy Stovall. The one thing that I really took away from this that I hadn't thought much about was the fact that you can think of safety and the incidents that you have and the problems that you have, whether it's a near miss or something much more catastrophic. You can view this as a work defect. And this is a simple concept, and maybe all my listeners have thought about this and I'm the idiot in the room, and that's okay. I guess I'm comfortable saying that. But once you start thinking about this in terms of quality and saying when that happens, that's a defect, I think for me that really changed how I thought about safety. And I can only imagine there was a lot more insights that you gleaned, because I certainly did in my preparation and talking to Tricia and JD and Jeremy and Todd, and then obviously listening and being part of what you just heard. So I want to thank all of them for making this happen. And thank you to the National Academy of Construction for bringing together Texas A&M and UT Austin to put this on. It was a really important event. And more importantly, what is going to happen to bridge the gap between what industry is looking for and the expectations on an active job site, and what we can do to undergrads. And if I'm a freshman on College Station, are there mental models and things that I can start to acquire and apply to my current life that will help me be a better, more effective manager and leader when I get to an actual job site full-time in 4 or 5 years? If you did indeed get value from this episode featuring Tricia Thibodeaux and Jeremy Stovall and JD Slaughter and Todd Svihovec, please rate and review this podcast. That means more to us than you know. And remember, our goal here is to make this the best podcast you listen to. So if you have further suggestions for guests or topics or a question you would like to pose to us that we could answer under the auspices of asking for a friend, we'd love to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out to me directly, Bradley at BradleyHartmanandCo.com. This episode was brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. If you're not forecasting your sales coming up, you're flying blind, solve it immediately with the Simple Sales Pipeline. And you can find more at thesimplesalespipeline.com. As for us, we're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.